we must honestly acknowledge the circumstances we inherited. 94 million Americans are out of the labor force. Over 43 million people are now living in poverty, and over 43 million Americans are on food stamps. More than 1 in 5 people in their prime working years are not working. We have the worst financial recovery in 65 years. In the last 8 years, the past administration has put on more new debt than nearly all of the other presidents combined. We've lost more than 1/4 of our manufacturing jobs since NAFTA was approved, and we've lost 60,000 factories since China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. Our trade deficit in goods with the world last year was nearly $800 billion. And overseas, we have inherited a series of tragic foreign policy disasters. Obamacare premiums nationwide have increased by double and triple digits. As an example, Arizona went up 116% last year alone. And we've spent trillions and trillions of dollars overseas, while our infrastructure at home has so badly crumbled.
After Tuesday night, nobody should have any more doubt that the US economy has been in the process of collapsing. Donald Trump's speech to a joint session of Congress is being hailed as his best speech ever. Even CNN's Van Jones praised Trump, which shocked many observers. Jones said that when Trump honored the widow of slain Navy SEAL Ryan Owens, that it was one of the most extraordinary moments you have ever seen in American politics. And Jones believes that Trump became President of the United States at that moment. But Trump's speech is not just being praised for that one moment. He detailed many of the most important problems that our nation is facing, and he explained his prescription for addressing those problems. Hopefully Trump's words help people to understand that our problems did not get fixed just because he got elected. It is going to take extraordinary action to fix those problems, because our problems run very deep. In particular, Trump made an exceedingly strong case that the US economy has been badly deteriorating for a very long period of time. The following are 11 quotes from the Trump speech to Congress that showed that the US economy is in a state of collapse.
94 million Americans are out of the labor force. Over 43 million people are now living in poverty. And over 43 million Americans are on food stamps. More than 1 in 5 people in their prime working years are not working. We have the worst financial recovery in 65 years. In the last 8 years, the past administration has put on more new debt than nearly all of the other presidents combined. We've lost more than 1/4 of our manufacturing jobs since NAFTA was approved. And we've lost 60,000 factories since China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. Our trade deficit in goods with the world last year was nearly $800 billion. Obamacare premiums nationwide have increased by double and triple digits. As an example, Arizona went up 116% last year alone. And we've spent trillions and trillions of dollars overseas, while our infrastructure at home has so badly crumbled.
I greatly applauded Trump for wanting to do something about the growing national crisis, but I just don't know where the money is going to come from. We have zero hope of turning our economy in a positive direction until we do something to fix our dramatically failing healthcare system.
I'm very skeptical about the repeal of Obamacare, and potentially they'll repeal it in some distant point in the future, so it'll still be around. I don't want to replace it with anything. That is the point. I don't even like the whole terminology of repeal and replace. I want to get rid of Obamacare, but not just Obamacare. I want to get rid of a lot of other rules and regulations and subsidies that predate Obamacare that caused all the problems that resulted in Obamacare being passed. We need to get the government out of health care and get the free market back in so that we can have quality care at affordable prices. We had that in America before the government got into health care in a big way in the 1960s, and I'd like to see all of that government intrusion into the free market that we've had since the Great Society programs. Let's roll it all back. Let's just not repeal Obamacare, but let's repeal all the other things that the government never should have done, which are the reason that health care is so expensive.
At the moment, Republicans in Congress seem extremely hesitant to take action. Instead, many Republican leaders are now talking about trying to fix Obamacare, and that simply is not going to work. You can't fix a steaming pile of garbage. All of the other facts that Trump listed about the economy were right on point too. I have been screaming for 7 years about our nightmarish trade deficit and the fact that the tens of thousands of businesses and millions of good-paying jobs were leaving the country. It is refreshing to finally have a president that understands how badly America has been hurt by imbalanced trade agreements, and my hope is that we will start to take constructive action in this regard. So much damage to the economy has already been done, and there are all kinds of indications that we are about to officially slide into yet another recession. Yesterday, we learned that the number of distressed retailers in this country is the highest that it has been since the last recession. Major lending standards are tightening, bankruptcies are rising, and employment growth at companies listed on the S&P 500 have gone negative for the first time since the last recession. It is being projected that GDP growth for the first quarter of 2017 will be barely above zero. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we actually had a negative reading. If we indeed are heading into a new recession, Trump and his supporters need it to happen as soon as possible so they can blame it on Obama.
We have the worst financial recovery in 65 years. In the last 8 years, the past administration has put on more new debt than nearly all of the other presidents combined.
If a recession begins a year from now, everyone will blame it on Trump, even if he's not to fault.
Last night was yet another test, and Donald Trump failed yet again.
I don't think you can describe Donald Trump in any way but deranged. Deranged Donald should be his label.
The Republican nominee is unfit to serve as president.
Presidency, it would be an act of recklessness to give him the office of commander-in-chief.
The one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's
Donald
direction.
Trump is the largest supporter of terrorism in the world.
But if a recession begins now, Trump and his supporters can pin responsibility for it on Obama, and then take credit if and when recovery occurs. Trump's speech on Tuesday night was very optimistic, and he seemed quite confident that every issue that we are facing as a nation can be fixed.
Everything that is broken in our country can be fixed. Every problem can be solved. and every hurting family can find healing and hope.
I hope that Trump is right, but I also know that the federal government is already $20 trillion in debt. US consumers are already more than $12 trillion in debt, and corporate debt has approximately doubled since the last financial crisis. You can't squeeze blood out of an apple, and you can't get out of a debt bubble by going into a lot more debt.
The first time the Fed hiked rates, December of 2015, the markets were giving the Fed the all clear, and then they tanked, right? We got off to the worst start to a year in history, and then the Fed backed off and didn't raise rates again for an entire year. Now, when they raised rates in December last year, it was in the middle of Trump mania, and so they kind of got a pass. But now we'll see. You know, this is a gigantic bubble. It's gotten a lot bigger since we elected Trump. Will this next rate hike prick it? I mean, there's a chance. I mean, eventually the air is going to come out of this bubble. So if it's not this rate hike, it's going to be something else. But, you know, you guys were talking earlier about the U.S. economy, oil prices. The economy is a mess. Look at Atlanta Fed is now looking for 1.2% first quarter GDP. It was at 3.4% February 1st. We are dangerously close to a recession in this country. Demand for gasoline is down. That's why oil prices are going down. And a rate hike is just going to, make the problem worse.
So you're reading the data and you're looking at oil prices and decline that we've seen over the past few days as evidence that there is a slowdown in the U.S. economy. That is the result of a slowdown.
There's a lot of evidence. In fact, if you look beneath those, window dressing for the manufacturing jobs that I think some of the manufacturers maybe added to curry some favor with Trump, look at what happened in retail sales. That could be the beginning of a huge trend. Why are retailers laying off so many people? Because Americans are shopped out. They're loaded up with credit card debt. They're buried under a mountain of auto debt and student loans. A lot of these retailers are going bankrupt, and these minimum wage hikes that we've been getting all around the country. We just printed the highest trade deficit in 5 years. We have the highest inflation in 5 years. It doesn't sound like things are on track. Look, Janet Yellen is always going to try to put a positive spin on everything. But the reality is the economy has barely been growing. And in fact, I think if the government was more honest about the inflation rate, we would have seen that we actually have been in a recession. That's why Donald Trump was elected president, because the economy was so weak, people voted for him. But, the markets are ultimately going to have to come to grips with this. As far as the Fed, look, the Fed wants to pretend that the economy is doing well, but look where we are. Look how long interest rates were at zero, and look how much they barely raised them, since they started talking about it a few years ago.
Where rates were and where, why they were there is yesterday's story. The fact of the matter is, look around the world. There's global expansion. You can't deny it. And the fact that rates are moving higher is a function of that. It's not just the U.S., by the way.
Look, What's moving rates higher is rising. No, it's rising inflation, and inflation is going to go a lot higher, and eventually that's going to push long-term interest rates up. But no, that's not reflation; it is inflation. And look at the dollar.
Weren't we complaining about deflation,
today,
though? I mean, that was the other.
And meanwhile, foreign stock markets, emerging markets, gold stocks are beating the U.S. market this year. They were beating the U.S. markets last year. In fact, foreign markets are going to beat the U.S. market every year of the Trump presidency.
I understand that there are so many people out there right now that are deeply optimistic about the future. But the truth is that we have no hope of a positive future unless we fundamentally change our ways as a nation. I wish that someone could show me evidence that this is happening, because I would be very glad to see it. As it stands, we continue to steamroll toward the kind of apocalyptic future for this country that I have been warning about for a very long time. It will take a lot more than words to fix America, and I think that Donald Trump understands this. Hopefully, many of his followers will start to get the message as well.
Arizona went up 116% last year alone. And we've spent trillions and trillions of dollars overseas, while our infrastructure at home has so badly crumbled. People in their prime working years are not working. We have the worst financial recovery in 65 years. In the last 8 years, the past administration has put on more new debt than nearly all of the other presidents combined. We must honestly acknowledge the circumstances we inherited. 94 million Americans are out of the labor force. Over 43 million people are now living in poverty, and over 43 million Americans are on food stamps. More than $1 in 500 billion. And overseas, we have inherited a series of tragic foreign policy disasters. Obamacare premiums nationwide have increased by double and triple digits. As an example, lost more than 1/4 of our manufacturing jobs since NAFTA was approved. And we've lost 60,000 factories since China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. Our trade deficit in goods with the world last year was nearly $8